We're back after a while now, and we're back in good style this time. So it's my pleasure to welcome Erik, my friend Harri Rantanen from Suomi, from Finland, and he's working for SEB, Svenska Enskilda Banken, if I recall perfectly, Skandinaviska actually. So yeah. I welcome today Harri here in this event of ours. Harri, welcome here. Would you please introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you're doing, and we start from this.
All right. Thanks a lot, Andrea, and thanks a lot, Erik. Really nice pleasure to be together with you in this nice forum. So Harri Rantanen is my name, and I work for SEB, like you said, the long name as well, really well, Andrea. So you know a little bit Swedish as well, I notice.
But basically because of my past.
and SEB is one of the top Nordic banks, and home country is Sweden, where there is both retail banking and corporate banking. And then we have a lot of other countries as well. So the home countries are Finland, Norway, Denmark, in addition to Sweden, I mean, UK, Germany, and now we are expanding to Netherlands, Austria, and Switzerland. And then we have international sites as well in Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, US, Poland. So that's mostly of them, some rep offices as well available. But we are international bank, mid-sized bank in global level. And my area in the bank is the old transaction banking, which is nowadays in our organization, corporate banking, and the product areas, cash management, receivables and supply chain finance, and trade finance. And my background is coming from payments domain. I've been working about 30 years with large corporations in the Nordics, because I was firstly 15 years as a middleware software vendor for large corporations for multi-banking. So they could send payments and receive bank account statements with the application that I was partly designing and delivering for the large corporates. The company was called Opus Capita, nowadays Nomentia. And then 2007, I joined SEB. And again, 15 years already here in the autumn this year, 16 already. And my job here is to be a business developer on these product areas that I listed. And like I said, my background is from the payments, but about 10 years ago, I started to be interested of trade finance as well as a, how would I say, ultimate challenge for making digitalization and automation and standardization happen. Because I had a lot of discussions with local Finnish and Nordic corporations, and they were a little bit concerned why payments domain is moving so fast into standardization globally with ISO 2022, and it doesn't happen too much in the trade finance. And I was diving deeper and deeper, and we were doing a lot of collaboration with these corporations and banks in the Nordics. And then we created a community in 2017 called Standardized Trust. And that was interesting because at that time there wasn't anything else for multinational corporations to offer but the Swift MT798. And many of the corporations were saying that that's not good enough. First of all, it was only Swift corporations that could be using it. And it was really not that structured data available, and automation was not possible to do. And that's why we created the community, and we looked into capabilities, how we can start defining a standard, and not only standard, but a semantic model for trade finance instruments like standby LCs, guarantees, and documentary credits. And we started with guarantees 2018, and we started to use 2013 versions of trade domain in ISO 2022. So instead of going into Swift MT798, we looked the standard that was already available then, but it was not used that much in any context, but it was following the good ISO 2022 standard with good model, data model, and business model behind it. And then we started to expand and innovate based on that together with the team. We are now about 30 active members and about 400 followers in the LinkedIn group. And
I'm one of them, by the way, you know.
Yeah, Andrea is there well representing also in the active member group, but we have vendors, we have, I mean, trade finance vendors, we have large corporations, of course, many of them from the Nordics, and then bankers in the team. And there we design the semantic model for these instruments. And also I have been trying to compose them even to JSON schema so that they can be also expressed in APIs for interoperability purposes. And we do not design any applications. We design only the semantic model that anyone in trade finance domain can use for interoperability, for internal data description or business descriptions, and then use that for any kind of data exchange, which is really close to my heart, how to make the corporate to bank and bank to corporate and other stakeholders data exchange happen. And then let's say 3 years ago, ICC also woke up that, okay, they have to do some work by themselves as well. And they created the Digital Standards Initiative, DSI, which is now running really well. They are doing excellent job collecting different trade finance related standards, not only trade finance standards, but also global trade standards for bill of ladings and certificates of origin and invoices, and then also that's kind of foundational standards so that we can start using them, or anyone can start using them. And they are openly available, which is a key thing for myself, that if you create a standard, it will not fly if you are not giving the development resources openly available. And that's why even now, on the latest months and last year, Swift also woke up that, hey, by the way, maybe we should also react to the trade finance and trade domain needs to move directly into APIs because of these trade finance and trade digital island platforms that are there. Some of them have even went down already, but there are still a multitude of existing and let's say legacy platforms like Global Trade that was purchased by Comgo. There was Marco Polo for R3 Corda blockchain or distributed ledger technology that went down. V.Trade went down with IPM Hyperledger Fabric, but there are still some alive as well, like Contour, where SEB is also investing and participating.
Indeed. Harri, just a question. I mean, we actually started out from this, what you mentioned. The constellation of ventures been put in place recently to start from 2017, and some of the devices that already went on. You mentioned V.Trade, you mentioned, by the way, Marco Polo Network. We don't have to forget about
just last week doing Everledger that
Everledger
last week,
which is in some way related to supply chain.
Yeah.
We forgot about TradeLens, which is now the sad story because so much money being invested. Now, I mean, we start from this. Hard lessons been learned. We'd love to hear your intake into this from the inside, because you're working on a bank, and those consortia have been bank-led, by the way, being created by banks. So why this demise, in your opinion? What went wrong? And what could be done to avoid in the future further demises, so downfalls in digitalization of trade finance and supply chain finance? Because we know the goal is there. And it's clear those industries will be digitalized. What can we do to be successful in that? Yeah,
that's you start with a really difficult question, but it's always good to have challenges in the life.
I'm a nasty guy. Harri can tell you, by the way.
Yes, he is.
Yes. Can you please grant me the screen sharing capability? So I can show my only slide today, because it's quite good segue for this question as well. So let's see if I can share it from here. Yes. And now you should see it. Do you? It's called Trade Finance Digitalization Prerequisites.
Yeah, got it.
And the business case is actually the answer for your question. So the interoperability is the first thing all of these platforms should take care of. Of course, they have to be running on good, valid, profitable business model as well, but they cannot live alone. The problem in trade finance is that, and even global trade, is that the amount of stakeholders is so big that you cannot connect them with each other by one-to-one integrations and defining your own legacy standard and defining your own internal monolith type of access. Of course, with the platform, you can define your own rule book. You can define the contract law so that you can say that, okay, in our platform, you can run everything digitally. But then it requires that every single participant follows your rule book, make a signature and commitment into that, pays the fee that is included there. But the problem is that the stakeholders that are coming into one platform most probably are using another platform for other purposes. Banks are a really good example of that. Our customers, large corporate customers, are in multitude of platforms. So how do we connect automatically without any hands or people manually logging into different platforms to serve our customers? We should have some kind of common standard available, interoperability, which allows us to connect whatever technology is there behind, whether that is a centralized database or distributed ledger technology or whatever implementation of the platform, without too heavy commitment and signatures and memberships in the platform. So interoperability is the key word and the key phenomenon by which this will be available. And the other parts of the pillars on my slides are also needed. Interoperability can be achieved in a digital manner if you have legal framework available with trade finance practices available, if you have digital trust available, and all the development tools and documentation are also freely available. So you cannot hide behind any scenes. You cannot say that, yeah, please pay me this much money and I will open my documentation for APIs, or I will open up my standard for example, even MT798, because you cannot base the good market practice, you cannot base interoperability into something that requires some kind of VIP membership or some kind of fee to be paid. Of course, even this kind of standard approach will need some kind of non-profit business model so that you can maintain and keep the standard available for as many persons and as many players as possible. But I think that these platforms that we were failing to the incapability of opening up in good enough way so that the interoperability could be established by this kind of multi-platform requirement, so that the players that need to access multiple platforms can be doing that automatically without any manual operations. Really long answer, but hopefully that triggers further and detailed questions as well. I can talk about this a couple of hours if you give me time, but it's so close to heart that, yeah. And that's why we established that standardized trust community outside the corporation hats and banking hats, because the people themselves were really concerned that if we do not do anything, this will not fly. There will not be any digital standards. And it has been proven right. Now there are so many good initiatives and even this kind of consolidating initiatives like DSI. And I know that Swift is now working together with ICC DSI under ISO 2022 Open Standards umbrella. And that will be the final good step forward so that we are now able to rely on a common business standard, common business process, and start designing on whatever technology these best practices available. But that will generate a lot of other changes.
Yeah. This picture entices many further questions. Then I will leave the stage also to Rick to express his own ones because it's so deeply involved also in the standard industry. But the very first thing that caught my attention into the slides is the thing with the MLITA, URDTT, and platform rule books. The question pops up in mind is how these three things start from Melissa, then down to URDTT, can step in as a major game changer. Related to this, we'd love to go down deeper into the URDTT, especially on the side that it allows new stakeholders to step in, maybe and fix one of the few pain points in trade funds. What's your intake into this thing?
Yeah, my final statement in the previous answer was that this will imply a lot of other changes, this digitalization. And one of the changes will be concerning these uniform rules that are there now for different instruments, because even though URDTT is there, so it's the uniform rules for digital trade transactions, which is again a digitalized umbrella for UCP and URDG. These acronyms for Uniform Customs and Practices, which is for documentary credits, UCP 600, and URDC, now I can't remember the number, 587 or something like that, which is for the guarantees and uniform rules, I mean. And they are based still on the old paper-based process, even though you can transform now your papers to PDF, and then you suddenly say that, okay, now we talk about electronic trade finance, even though we talk about pictures of the papers. So the URDTT is taking care that this MLETR can be implemented with the trade finance practices, but still the basic rules are based on many times referring to SWIFT MT 798 practices. So you are referring to 700 or for documentary credits or 760 to guarantees, and many of these uniform rules are still saying, practically referring to these old standards, SWIFT MT standard fields, that these cross-references have to be there, and 46A documents required are listing these and these rules so that you can follow them. Of course, they are now in full practice and full need and use, but when we move to digital trade and trade finance, we suddenly are in the totally new world. And that means that the processes must be changing as well. Because why should we wait for, in documentary credit, for example, when the exporter is obliged to deliver the document set as a presentation to the advising banks? Why should we wait for all the documents to be ready if we process the data sets instead? So whenever the bill of lading will be ready from the carrier to the exporter, it can be delivered directly to the bank so that the bank can start the data analysis with the structured information on the standardized bill of lading, maybe with the DCSA API standard, and make, for example, immediately, in a couple of seconds, all the screening, AML, ESG checks, and return and response to the corporate or even directly to the carrier that, by the way, this is really good, we can process this, or say that, okay, the vessel you are using here might be connected to some weird businesses in some countries that are high-risk countries. And we do not process anything yet. We do not need invoices, or we do not need certificates of origins before we are exactly sure that the bill of lading is in good order. And that's why there is no need to send all the documents before we know that the, for example, bill of lading contents are really good. And that means that the UCP and URDT rules might be in the need of changing. And finally, to make this happen in a global level, in large scale, without contract law or rule books in the platforms, we have to implement MLETR. We arranged with Standardized Trust a session by Chris Southworth from ICC UK in January, and he was explaining how this UK change of MLETR or addendum into local law in UK was happening. How is it possible for really conservative country like UK to make this kind of amazing change in 18 months only available in the legislation? We were totally stunned in Nordics that how is it possible that UK is doing this as a first country in Europe, and suddenly in this month, or I can't remember, was it in May or June, when the law is ready, in 2 months it will be in use. And with Singapore, who is also having MLETR already implemented, they can create a digital corridor for trade.
Abu Dhabi
They
also.
Yeah, and Bahrain.
And it's not short-lived, by the way, because if you think,
yeah,
it's all British Empire in the end. And when the
yeah, and that is the key thing, that we have to implement this MLETR into local legislation in practically all the countries. So I know that G7 will do this anyway. Germany is in the process. France is in the process. I hope Italy
France
will
is
follow
ahead
as
of
well.
time. Stepping up in the US, maybe the leader in 2 days. And Paris is going to be one of the seismic center of the shift.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering where Italy is that, but I think I know the answers already.
What is your answer, Andrea, for that?
What is your answer? You know the answer, but what is it?
No, I'll keep it for myself. Sorry.
Don't want to be insulting to your national.
No, I prefer to ignore them anyway. But that's for myself.
Yeah, I guess you saw last week in LinkedIn, we published together with ICC Finland a news that I am now nominated as a chair for the ICC Finland Digital Economic Commission. And one of our key targets now is to get this MLETR into Finnish legislation as well, so that we ensure that there are no...
I think I cannot fit for Italy. I'm not qualified enough to do that. But anyway.
All right. But we try to take the attention here as well in Finland, that we have to ensure that there is not any loophole for anyone in government,
if a movement,
in corporations, in banks, to say that, we cannot process this document in a digital manner because here and there in this paragraph in any kind of law is a statement that you have to have a paper, or you have
the
to
shift
have
has to be global. This is what I learned by talking to Chris Southworth, talking to David Linnell. We know that the electronic trade bill is going to be a game changer, and it's going to come in soon. Allegedly June, July, we don't know when, but it's going to come soon. Sarah Green, she's doing an amazing job together with Chris. It's coming, but it's not going to be defining unless the movement, the shift forward is global. So you perfectly caught this thing. No loopholes, nothing left behind. So you go global, although this will invest more than 50 countries globally, it's largely not enough. And I guess UK is going to surge collaboration in that. My gut feeling goes that direction.
Yeah, and the beauty in MLETR is that it will not replace anything in the local legislation. It just gives an opportunity to use in parallel digital documentation or digital data sets instead of the paper, or together with the paper. And that's the beauty there. And when I read the addendum into UK law that they implemented, it's three and a half pages, nothing more. It's really simple. It's technology agnostic.
Exactly.
And you can implement it really easily into the legislation, and suddenly you have a totally open market for digital data exchange. And that's really a game changer, like you said. We have to do this to make this happen in large scale.
It brings back to the first item, by the way. You said it perfectly. A massive data set, data from sources around the world, and you managed to highlight this, by the way. You have not only the AML, you have the sanctions, all the things that trade implies. You have the ESG side, you have the sustainable development goals. We have to stress the fact over and over again that you cannot speak about digitalization, you cannot talk about digitalization if you don't talk about ESG and SDG. By the way, you perfectly point this out. I remember your speech at the Hyperledger Trade Finance SIG in 2022, end of May, by the way, 1 year ago with Karina. Talking about these issues, we were talking about payments on that occasion, but never mind, it's still related to trade, it's still related to supply chain. So something big is enabled by simple model law. And you said it's very simple to put it in place. Just a few pages. And you can interact with it. You need to not to replace anything. So this is the great advantage. And the message maybe that we should be delivering to the audience, to the market globally. One more thing, really... Harri. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say that we as a bank as well, which I'm representing and being an employee, we have been really good in this green financing solutions and green financing products and offering. Starting already over 20 years, we have had good products on that. But me coming from transaction banking perspective, I'm really keen on finding out how we can, on transactional level, help out our corporate customers to be exactly sure on ESG basis as well, with whom they are playing with, which kind of products there are that they are delivering, what kind of dual use there might be, and being able to do that. It's not only a question that we pose a lot of questionnaire to our customers, but we should be able to do that as ourselves. If we get the business agreements, the business transaction details with the trade finance, documented credit documentation, for example, in structured format, suddenly we have capability to start testing with existing tools and the databases that are there already and evolving all the time. We can be doing this kind of immediate checks when we get the data instead of paper. No one has to read anything and tap in manually into any kind of system, because we can route the data directly with, for example, LEI identifier or data HS codes for the products, and we can do analysis based on that using all the external data sources that are available there. To be in the role where banks should be, advising the customers to do right things, to steer the finance to the transformation for more sustainable businesses, not only with the carbon emissions, but all natural impact and also socio-ecological things, so that we
everybody talks about carbon. But what about, for instance, one more polluting element, which is plastic?
Yes.
I don't hear many people talk about this, and you consume a lot of plastic and other polluting material all over your supply chain. What about chemicals? Those things, Harri, and this is my next question, are on the origination side, in my view, very important. So far, facilities for payments have been originated solely, uniquely on financial economical data sets. Evaluate balance sheet. How can this picture based on alternative data sources step in and enable inclusion of those being left apart from the big picture? And I'm referring to micro, small, and medium enterprises. That's my reflection. I would love to hear your opinion into this.
Yeah, and I can answer with the I would say what is the biggest problem in the ESG data is that there is no semantics in the data. Again, I come back into this data issue, and that was part of the header also for this session. So that how we can move from paper to digital, and how we can move from the data to wisdom, because there is this DKIW data pyramid. So that you start with the basic data. The data is the basement, but the data practically only is a measurement of the reality, and we can create measures by ourselves. So there can be kilograms or pounds to measure how much something is weighing. And finally, you have to define that in this respect, I'm using kilograms instead of other measurements. And then with the weight, I have also width and height. And then I have suddenly an information. So that, for example, a package that I'm sending in trade documentary credit as an exporter, I send something with the shipping, and I have to define that what is that information with the package. And I have to tell that, yeah, there is this kind of product, it's weighs a couple of kilos, and it has a package with the width and height and depth in this measurement. And I have information. So from the data with the structured components, I can get records, which are information for me, but that's not good enough. I have to make knowledge out of that as well. So when I move to the knowledge level, I need semantics, because I have to define for these records, which has this information of data measurements. I have to define what these components actually are, how they are used, and how they are interoperable. And the semantic model, graph databases, and knowledge graphs, they were created about 2012. And surprise, surprise, which are the companies that started to use them? Google, for example, Facebook, because they needed to combine so many different data sources together. And they needed this kind of network model where they can define what kind of relations these different objects in the data and information are having. And suddenly they could start teaching their computers with this kind of relationships that the different objects have. And they started to talk about this natural language processing, because they are composing simple statements. You have subject, you have object, you have predicatives as well. So the verbs. So someone does something, and suddenly the computer understands the same language that you are talking as a human being, and vice versa. You can start teaching the computer with this kind of machine learning and deep neural networks, and suddenly the computer starts understanding what kind of patterns there are, what kind of anomalies there are. And now the latest tools, for example, in document checking, are using this. TradeStream, TradeSun, Conpend, all of these players and vendors, they are teaching now the UCP 600 and URDG rules for these engines. And when the documents come in, even in PDF format, they can transform the pictures suddenly into the data sets, and you have knowledge of the data sets available there. The final step from the knowledge to the wisdom, cannot yet be done by the computers. We do not have yet the artificial general intelligence. Luckily, maybe you can say, because there is now a lot of discussion about this ChatGPT and how far they can go, and are we now close to singularity, that the computers are better than us in this level. I was still saying that the highest level of knowledge and wisdom is still our area, human area, because we have still the capability of association, and we understand, we can associate some things that the computer is not able to do yet, and we can still create something from nothing, so that we just use our imagination, and suddenly we can do new business models and new creations in art and even
maybe also new products.
New level. Yes,
maybe new products, new instruments, because one thing that always capture my attention is, if you do bring this deeper data, you go deeper into the reality, your measurements, it's about reality. How much does this weigh? What's the temperature of this thing? What does it come from? We know that being full production into trade and trade funds, we know that most of the instruments now in place, think of the LCs, they are built on the principle of independence and abstractness. You are checked on documents. Never mind what's going on in real life. So is this an infringement of the principles, or maybe this allows those instruments to evolve towards new ones and to go fully automated or something else, or create new ones, evolutionized ones? Is this the case to still be talking about documentary credits in a data economy, in a data picture like the one we were printing, by the way. I know I'm provocative and very nasty again.
No problem at all, because that is the key element, because when we talk about data, and we say that this package is weighing 50 kilos, we also have to trust for that. So we have to know that this data is verifiable. And we cannot trust the data if we do not know who has been measuring it. Has the scale where the weight was measured, is that balanced in the right way? Who has been confirming that this scale is doing the job like it should be done? So we come back into this trust, and even that trust is needed in the paper documentation as well. But in the digital way, when we do everything in a couple of seconds, or we let the computers do the checking and computers to analyze the data, we have to be sure that the data is coming from the verifiable source, so that we come there also into the discussion that what kind of technology has to be there behind, so that we can make these verifiable identifiers available, verifiable credentials available. And that's why I was in some stage 1 year or 2 years ago, I was really enthusiastic to look into these W3C standards, which are there also on the screen, that how we can define the relationships between the unique identifiers for corporations, people, when they represent the corporations as personas, and finally to things as well. And then we come to these digital product passports, that is now the EU project on this. So we cannot trust the data unless we know who has produced it, and if the credentials are verifiable there, so that the document or data set can be tracked down and back into the actual origin of that. And that origin has to be unambiguous as well, so that there is no a problem of being copied or hijacked anyhow. We are coming into this really, yeah. So where am I? Where was I? I was about the trust issue. Yeah. So the criticality there is the verifiability of the data, and that's really key thing in the digital economy and digital trade, and finally digital trade finance as well. For us banks, it's really critical that we know exactly where the data is coming, and that's the key element here. So otherwise, it can be whatever data, it can be coming from duplicate source. For example, if we finance a invoice in receivables and supply chain finance, we have to be sure that not other bank or financial institution or any kind of investor has been financing that same invoice already. And there are also there now some tools to be able to do that. And
absolutely,
for example, distributed ledger technology and blockchain is quite good tool in this kind of registries, where you can define unambiguous supply chain, for example, so that you
it's
can be exactly
immutable,
sure.
it's tamper proof. We know
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
We have stressed this. If you remember, Harry, you stepped in 2021 with your speech about do we understand our data? It's still exactly. In May 2021. So that's the big advantage when you're talking about new technologies in trade and trade finance. DLTs in that case are game changer because of these features. Blockchain is Web3, can change the whole stuff into this. One more thing, Harry. Again, how do you see, and I want to go a little backwards into what we're saying, maybe because the answer should be given. What could be the role of the URDCC compared especially to the DLPC, which is specifically being created by BAFT in the USA for DLTs and blockchain? What could be the role in going further deep into digitization of trade and trade finance?
Yeah, we have done already.
Who could step in as stakeholders instead of, you see, normal banks to enhance inclusion of small and micro companies?
Again, where should I start? I would say that the common understanding by the financial institutions and banks for the blockchain technology and distributed ledger technology overall has been a little bit stamped by Bitcoin, and then cryptocurrencies and all the crashes has been there. So the reliability of the technology has been spoiled a little bit by these kind of crashes that has been there. And also in the Bitcoins, of course, so everyone is referring that, yeah, it's not sustainable by the electricity consumption and so on. But finally now, banks and financial institutions and investors are looking into this area because of digital assets, so that how we can transform the real world assets, physical assets, to digital assets. And again, to do that in a reliable way so that you can be exactly sure that when this transformation of digital twin will be available for physical asset, you have to be sure that, again, it's done properly, 100% sure. But now when the digital asset phenomenon is there, and we also think about central bank digital currencies, even a couple of stable coins by some regulators, even now thinking about that and saying that, yeah, they are becoming more and more close to the approved by regulation. In Europe, we have upcoming MICA regulation upcoming. So most probably there will be more and more financial institutional solutions and bank solutions available for custodian for different kind of digital assets, custodian for cryptocurrencies and stable coins. And finally, central bank digital currencies will be moving us more into accepting, approving blockchain and distributed ledger technology. And that will be meaning that more and more solutions will be available there. Not solely, but they will be together with centralized databases and authority-based solutions that we are still having in the banks in multitude of other purposes. So we see that there will be a parallel life of different technologies per use cases where they are needed. And I say that the use case for blockchain is really good for different kind of identity solutions, securing this kind of certificate solution so that you can share the data in a manner that is reliable and verifiable overall. You know who are behind the data. You can always go back and see of the trust again. Okay, now
you managed to answer two questions in mine in a single one, because the very next one for me was, how do you see the digital assets stepping in as an enabler for further inclusion, and especially in view of the approval of the MiCA framework?
Yeah, if you think about trade finance instruments as assets, they have been quite illiquid assets. It's really hard to share the asset like you do for asset classes, existing asset classes in markets of the assets overall. But now, for example, the project that was started by ITFA, with the trade finance distribution is a good example of the good use case of blockchain that you can ensure by different kind of blockchain technologies, that the asset, for example, whether that is an invoice or a letter of credit or other type of illiquid asset, you can transform it into a digital asset by this kind of tokens, tokenization. And suddenly, not only banks with large capital reserves, but also small investors who are interested of more liquid assets, or liquidizing the asset into the manner so that you can earn some money out of that, because there is still markets available for this kind of quite good products like letter of credit is from earning perspective as well, because it's good product for the exporter so that you can manage the risk of the trade finance. But having that from one single bank or only few banks, it's really hard to get it. And for SMEs, the products are really expensive at this moment. And getting more and more investors, small investors, to take part of this kind of bigger letter of credit asset. When it's a digital asset, you can buy and invest in a fraction of the letter of credit, let's say 100th or 1000th of part of the letter of credit. And suddenly you can invest only, let's say 10 euros or 100 euros for really sure a letter of credit by two big players. And then you can earn some money out of that when the payment has been done and everything has done according to the uniform rules into actual business case and business transaction. And then the profit of the letter of credit or commission can be shared with the small investors as well. There is no market at this moment, or there hasn't been a market for this kind of easy tokenized asset sharing and distribution. But now these tools are upcoming, and it gives a new opportunity for smaller investors to come into the game and get the money for the smaller players, smaller exporters and importers as SMEs to come along as well. So I see this a really positive development, which is enabled by technology and again digital trust.
Oh, it's really interesting what you mentioned. By the way, it's a new form of partaking a deal which is highly parcelized. So that's interesting to hear, by the way. And we have to stress the fact that in most of the cases, we're talking about security tokens, regulated ones. So it's no longer a case of, hey, being exposed to very high risk. Remember also that trade finance is usually considered as a low risk industry because less credit, where is the risk? It's very little. So it's still a very appealing industry in the end for investing. And to have a parcelized system is some kind of being inclusive on both sides, both the investors and the exporters and importers, of course, which are the main stakeholders in the picture. We're coming towards the end of the hour, Harri.
Yep.
Eric,
you haven't spoken today. You're too shy, maybe.
No, I'm just very impressed by all of Harri's knowledge. For me, a few takeaways for sure. Yes, trade finance, supply chain, all that is changing absolutely at a crazy pace. I mean, you mentioned, right, new financial instruments behind all this. These are things that were not used by smaller parties before because for the lack of understanding. But these new digital tools, I think, are democratizing you know, that aspect of the business. Change does take a lot of time. I mean, you mentioned something earlier, Harri, about trust, right? How do you make sure that your box is measured the right way or the same way that somebody else is measuring that box, which is something that I used to live in my old days. You would have a shipper measure their box, their skids, and then you know, get to the warehouse who would measure it completely differently and then send it to the airline who would measure it a third way separately, right? So who was actually right? These are all problems that we need to think about as we move into digital and into trust, you know, in these new ecosystems for sure. But very encouraging, very nice to see it happen. The same way old people like myself, right? I was joking before I called Harri that I've been in logistics for 30 years, which explains my haircut. You've been in payments for about 30 years, you mentioned. So I'm guessing the stress level is not exactly the same in the payment sector because look at your hair versus mine, right? But still, it's fun to see.
Hey, don't forget about me, by the way.
Well, you're kind of right in the middle, I think, right?
Yeah.
Maybe more on my side. But yeah, no, very encouraging, fun to see the laws supporting all this changing rapidly too. You mentioned Melly, you mentioned you know, people, even the UK adopting faster pace, and they're the basis of a lot of international laws, or at least, you know, in colonial worlds. But it's happening. It's happening, maybe sometimes not as fast as we all want it to happen, but it's happening and it's fun to see happen as well.
Yeah, that
My
was really
thoughts.
good summary, Eric. I'm totally agreeing. Like I said, when I started 10 years ago to deep dive into trade finance, it was really, how would I say, tedious. It didn't happen
Mhm.
too much, and I was trying together with the community my best, but it didn't happen still. But now suddenly, like I said, in 2-3 years back, the pace has been accelerating really, really good. And I really enjoy now seeing always good news somewhere from the world that something positive is happening in digitalization of trade finance
Mhm.
and global trade, so that the stakeholders, different stakeholders that used to be in their own silos, logistic companies, banks, insurance policy companies, and authorities, everyone is now talking the same language and trying to make the as smooth as possible digital trade happen because it's a common good.
And even with the failures, right, we're
Yeah.
still seeing overall progress,
Yes.
right? Even
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
TradeLens or
we, s-
WeTrade
we've
or
seen the
the ones that
value,
were
by the
announced,
way.
we are seeing progress.
Yeah, failures is part of the innovations and progress. You cannot go further unless you learn something from the mistake from the past.
Well said. Andrea?
This is great, by the way. I love the insight being shared today. And I really do thank you, Harry, for being with us. It's this thing that in my own vision is the talks about big impact is our way to contribute to the industry, summarizing, seeing, gathering a few great minds that being engaged in the digitalization of the space of trade finance. So this might be maybe the very first talk between us having in the future, as it was for Sarah, as it was for Alisa, and more to come in the future. Start from next week, by the way, where we be guesting my friend Mauricio from Brazil. So, I thank you so much for being with us today. It was a great conversation. And most probably in 2024, let's continue talking because the environment is evolving very quickly at a pace never seen
Exactly.
before. So we want to be at the center as BSCA, giving our contribution as an association to foster the change and make it happen as quickly as possible. Thanks for contributing, and we'll be back to you with the official recording, most probably with an extract from this conversation to be shared on LinkedIn and other media. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you
Thanks, Eric.
for giving this opportunity.
It was great talking
Thank
to
you,
you,
Eric.
Harry. And thanks for being with us. Thanks, Eric, for backing us up. And talk
Thank
soon
you. Thank
again.
you.
Always.
See
Bye,
you.
Eric.
Bye bye.
Bye, Harry.